Okay, the topic we are working on today is called interpret linear functions. This is the code DA6 from your 8th grade IXL. The question below says, this equation shows how the time required to ring up a customer is related to the number of items being purchased. And then they give you a function, t equals p plus h. The variable p represents the number of items being purchased, and the variable t represents the time required to ring up the customer. How long does it take to ring up a customer with 5 items? So, what we have to do here, at least in the beginning, is we're going to plug in an item or plug in a number from our word problem into our function and solve it. So, 5 is the number of items and variable p is the number of items. So if I put a 5 where the p is, I'm going to do 5 plus 8, which is 13 seconds. Okay. So we can skip the word problem because it says down here after 2 weeks, W is definitely weeks. So 8 times 2 would be 16. Okay. Let's jump up a level here and see if we get a little bit more tricky. Okay. So down here it says what is the maximum number of guests there can be if Kenny can afford to spend a total of $12 at the retirement party? What does G represents? G represents the number of guests. C represents cost. So if I put a 12 here, then that means 12 needs to equal 12. Okay, that's kind of a weird one. What about this one? It says, how long does it take to complete a transaction with one product? P is definitely product. So 12 times 1 is 12, and 12 plus 7 is 19 seconds. All right, let's jump up another level here. Okay, 64. So, how many track practices would it take for Anne to run 19 miles? P is practices. So, if I put to run 19 miles, D is distance. So, this is where it gets a little different. Let me show you. Okay, let's go ahead and use our pen. So you don't want to put a 19 here. You don't want to just plug the numbers in. That doesn't make sense because you have to look at what the variables mean. P is the number of practices, right? Number of practices. D is the distance in miles. So what we have to do for this one is we need to plug in 19 here, okay, for distance. 19 equals what number plus 17? And we can do mental math here, right? 2 plus 17 is 19. But if you want to use algebra, you could do that. Just subtract 17 from both sides, cancel it out, and P is going to equal 2. So 2 practices. So sometimes you can plug it into either variable. You got to pay real close attention to that. Okay, let's jump another level. See how difficult these things can get. Okay, we're at 81 now. So how long does it take to ring up a customer with 7 items? 7 items. So let's look here. T represents the time and P represents the items. So this isn't too hard, right? I just put a 7 here where the P is. 7 plus 6, which is 13. Okay. All right. If Sydney budgets a total of $93 for her graduation picnic, how many attendees? So D represents the dollars. So we have to put the 93 on the left side of the equation, right? So I have to say 93 equals, because D is dollars, 17 times A plus 25. So now we probably need to use algebra, right? We could plug a number in here, 17 times what plus 25. But let's just do what we know. Subtract 25 from both sides. Cancel that out. And 17A equals 93 minus 25. Let's just use borrowing 13. This is going to be 8 and 6. And if we divide both sides by 17, 68 divided by 17 is 4. So 4 attendees. Okay. And I'm going to skip up one more level and we'll do one more. I think you guys are getting the idea. Let's skip up to probably in the 90s, I would presume here. Let's check it out. Yeah, 90. Okay. All right. So it looks like when you get to the 90 level, we've got negatives, we've got decimals, we got all kinds of stuff. Okay. Up to how many sandwiches can Cooper make and still have 76.2 ounces of jelly left? J represents the amount of jelly left remaining, right? So we're going to plug in our 76.2 where the J is, and then we're going to solve it using algebra. So remember, this goes right where the J is. So let's do that. 76.2 equals, I know that's a lame 7. I'm sorry. This tablet's tough to write with. Negative 8.1 S plus 84.3. Okay, so using algebra, remember we always want to get rid of our add subtract terms first. So let's subtract 84.3 from both sides and subtract 84.3 from 76.2. So this cancels out and we're going to be left with negative 8.1. I'm sure you would use a calculator here if you want to speed it up, but it's the same thing as 84.3 minus 76.2. So when you do that, it's going to be 8.1. And when we're picking the sign, remember, look at the numbers, ignore the signs for a second. This is 84.3, 76.2. 84.3 is a larger number, so we're going to steal the negative with it. So it's going to be negative 8.1. And it looks like if we divide both sides by negative 8.1, we're going to end up with positive 1. Because this will cancel out, leaving us S, and negative 8.1 divided by negative 8.1 is just positive 1. Click submit, and we're good.